Hello, everyone. Welcome. And thank you so much for attending the session, Disabling AI, an approach to deconstructing ableism in data and design with our presenter, Jennifer Andrews. My name is Milan Fredericks. I am a proud CUNY SPS alum in the Communications and Media BA program. And as a millennial, I am legally required to tell you that my Hogwarts house is Slytherin and that my Patronus is the Snow Owl. It is a law. We all have to do this. Take with that what you will. Before we start, there are a few announcements. First, this session will be recorded and published on the CUNY SPS website after the conference concludes. Please keep your mics muted to avoid any disruption throughout the session. Closed captions have been enabled and they will be available to those who need them. Whether your camera is on or off, we ask that you be mentally present and that you stay engaged throughout the session. First and foremost, this is a learning environment, so we encourage you to share your questions, observations, and experiences in the chat so that we can all learn together. Lastly, we have a raffle for the conference. Information on how to enter will be provided at the end of the session. So with that said, please allow me again to introduce Jennifer Andrews, our presenter for Disabling AI, an approach to deconstructing ableism in data and design. Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Milan. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to spend the next half hour with everyone to talk about AI and to talk about disability as well. So I'm a disability studies in the Disability Studies MA program, but I also work in experience design. And what I do there is I build Gen AI platforms for advertising and marketing. So it's a really fun career, but pairing that with my studies here has really, really informed the design work that I do. So today I'm going to be presenting for about 15 minutes, and then we can open it up to Q&A. I'm sure you'll have a ton of questions. My topic today is called Disabling AI with the subtitle Deconstructing Ableism in Data and Design. So if you don't know what any of that means, that's okay. I will unpack everything as I go. I also prepped a little glossary for everyone in case you need it. So Milan is going to be dropping that into the chat so you can follow along. And one note before we start, there are a lot of Gen AI images in my presentation. Some of them might make you feel happy. Some of them may make you feel a little strange. That's intentional and really demonstrates the power and also the really strange bias that is very much baked into Gen AI. So the document Milan is putting into the chat also has image descriptions as well. So hope that you can follow along. All right. So I also have a few disclaimers before I start. Now, I realize this is an academic setting, and AI is a very hot button issue in academia, which is why we're having this conference, right? And really digging into the subject. A few of my classmates are presenting today. Meki just did a really good job before me, and a couple folks are presenting tonight. So I hope that you are able to join their sessions. But what I wanted to confess here is that I use AI a lot, not only in my day-to-day work, but also here at CUNY. So I'm going to explain that a little bit more. I do not use Gen AI to write. I use AI to gather research, to edit, and to make sure I understand papers. So probably what I do most with AI is I ask it questions about the research that I've gathered. For example, right now I have a disability law and policy class. So after I read a case, I sort of ingest those cases into Google Notebook, and I make sure that I understand what I just read. It's a little bit like having a study group where you ask each other questions, but there's only you and the AI. So it's a really effective way to study here. So if you have questions at the end of the presentation sort of about that process, I'm happy to answer any of those. So I'm going to go on to slide 3 if you're following along in the guide. So this is my second disclaimer. AI is always changing. A lot of us in this program did our research way back during winter break. So a lot of what we learned has changed since then. Large language models, and Meki talked a lot about large language models in the presentation before, or LLMs, they get better every single day. And it's really incredibly difficult to keep up with what's happening in the space. So if you feel stressed out by the rapid pace, you are not alone. It is a lot. I work in Gen AI every day, and there are times where I just want to give up and go take a nap because it's so much so quickly. So just know that you are not alone. And I'm really hoping that what I share with you today can make you a little less stressed and a little more hopeful about AI. So before I actually start the presentation, I just want to do a quick accessibility check with everybody, make sure everyone can participate in the presentation in the way that they need. So I'm going to pause here and just make sure everyone is good to go. And I'm going to take a drink of water.
Yes.
Great. Okay, let us go. All right, so let's get started. So why are we discussing AI through the lens of disability studies? Well, the study of disability here at CUNY SPS, it's an amazing program, is about understanding disability through a social context, not a medical one. That's very important. So our coursework here looks at disability in terms of art, architecture, advocacy, religion, law, entertainment, even personal narrative. So when it comes to AI, it kind of touches on everything, and you're about to find out why. So I'm moving on to slide 5 now. In today's conversation, I'm going to mention bias a lot. Now, there is no getting around bias. Humans are inherently biased. So that means no matter what we touch, we bring that bias with us. This is also very true when humans design or when they build technology or when they look at data. So keep that in mind as we go. There's no one group that's responsible for bias in AI. We're really all on the hook for understanding how our own bias shows up in AI-related work. Now moving on to slide 6. The concept of disabling AI for the purposes of this conversation is twofold, has a double meaning. I really like AI and I work in AI, so I'm not saying that we need to shut AI down. What I mean by disabling is taking the ableism out of AI and then putting more disability data and more disability lived experience back into it. So that's the gist of today's talk. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands that important point. I'm not here to discuss how AI should be shut down. I'm actually advocating for how we can use it more ethically, more responsibly, and more inclusively. Now, moving on to slide 7. The first section of the talk today discusses how ableism manifests in AI. And again, you're going to see some weird images throughout. That's because AI's interpretation of disability is actually how society sees disability. A lot of LLMs, or those large language models, believe that a disabled person is a white male in a wheelchair. Now, we know that the disability community is much more diverse than this, but the folks that build and train these LLMs are bringing their bias to that work. And I'll give a few examples of how that manifests in a few slides. So I'm now on slide 8. But before I go on, it's a good time to actually define ableism. I've mentioned it a lot. What is ableism? So according to Google Gemini, which has worked really hard to be a very ethical and responsible LLM, ableism means discrimination and social prejudice against people with disabilities. It's rooted in the belief that typical abilities are superior. So to give you a real world example, when you enter a classroom, perhaps as a deaf or hard of hearing person, and there are no captions available, there are no sign language interpreters, you cannot participate in the conversation, right? That basically tells that non-hearing person that they are less than and that the hearing world is the superior world. That honestly does not seem right to me, and I hope it doesn't seem right to you. So that is what ableism is. So I'm now on slide 9. So not to confuse you even more, but because we're talking about ableism in the context of AI, this concept of techno-ableism by Dr. Ashley Hsu is relevant. She is one of my absolute favorite disability studies scholar. Marley, who's on the line too, loves Dr. Hsu. And this book of hers published in 2023 absolutely exploded my brain. I've read it so many times. She describes techno-ableism in AI as focusing on curing or erasing disability rather than supporting disabled people as they are. So her examples are all around things like AI-powered exoskeletons, cochlear implants to sort of overcome disability rather than providing choices for diverse needs. It's a huge concept, so take a moment. Ableism becomes very complex when it comes to technology. So the AI of today is basically saying, hey, you, disabled person over there, can be a lot better if you just have this piece of super pricey technology. And that's a pretty ableist way to be. I hope you agree. Now on slide 10, whoops, this is the picture of Dr. Hsu's example of exoskeleton. So on the far right, If someone has mobility issues, puts that exoskeleton on, then supposedly they're no longer disabled. Now that feels really strange. If you're probably also wondering where the AI is. So these AI powered exoskeletons are basically wearable robots, right? They attach to the user's body, typically around the legs and hips, and they use motors and sensors to assist with movement. Also, check this out, they can also run up to 4,000 US dollars. So when we talk about AI being inaccessible, that also means it's out of reach financially for a lot of people too. So the image in the middle is of a homepage of an AI product. It's full of low contrast colors, complex animations, and icons that aren't immediately accessible for all users. And one thing I've found with Gen AI specifically is that basic principles of web accessibility go completely out the window in order to favor the technology. So most AI and machine learning engineers are not sitting around thinking about how to make AI accessible. They're sitting around trying to figure out what AI is. So as AI becomes more and more a part of every day, I'm also noticing that it's more and more inaccessible in terms of how people with disabilities can engage with it. And that is a huge bummer. The last photo on this slide is of a person with a speech disability. Again, AI generated. Now, you probably have experienced yourself poor captioning on Teams, poor captioning on Zoom, maybe when a non-native English speaker is presenting. That's because AI captioning was not trained on certain types of accents or voice cadences. And that is doubly true for people with speech disabilities. They have been completely left out of this part of AI's advancement, and that absolutely needs to change. Now, I'm moving on to slide 11. I have a few more examples I'd like to share about how ableism has been manifesting in the world of AI. And a very important one is data exclusion. And I'm really sorry for this image of the sad wheelchair, but this is how the LLM Firefly actually interpreted my prompt around data exclusion. AI systems rely heavily on large data sets to learn from, and these data sets don't always include sufficient data from disabled people. As an example, facial recognition may not include people with atypical facial features, mobility aids, or maybe neurodivergent behavior patterns, and that leads to bias and inaccurate results. Additionally, one's disability status, as we all know, is very complex, and it may or may not involve self-identification. So if many people don't identify as disabled, this also leaves them out of data sets. So not self-IDing, absolutely okay, right? But the trick is that these AI models assume that non-disclosed disabled users are actually typical users, which is going to skew results and training and really leave all their experience out of data sets. That's a lot to think about. That's a very complicated idea. I want to move on to employment discrimination as well, which is another big ableist issue where AI-powered platforms really contain a whole lot of bias. So this image in the middle is a result I got back from ChatGPT. Was really interesting. What ChatGPT told me is that it couldn't actually generate an image that I wanted about employment discrimination against people with disabilities because it violated the content policies. And I was like, whoa, wait, that's really wild. So the reason is because discrimination, as we know, is really rampant when it comes to employment for people with disabilities. The AI actually knows that's wrong, but it also won't give me an image. So that was just sort of a really wild circumstance while I was putting this presentation together. And then another place that ableism can manifest is actually in software. So right now there is software on the market that can rate potential candidates. And this software actually misinterprets things like facial tics or speech patterns, eye contact, or emotional expressions. And they deem those less competent for jobs, right? Which is completely biased and unfair. People with autism, anxiety, motor disabilities can also be unfairly flagged because those models are trained on neurotypical non-disabled expressions that are completely labeled incorrectly. So that is also not a very cool thing. All right, I'm moving back. So the last image on this slide is what I like to call low-key bias. So you'll notice a lot of the presentation, you'll notice that a lot from the presentation images that you've seen already. So this particular example is from Google's Notebook LM, which assigned an icon to the notebook I created. There's nothing inherently wrong with this icon, right? The AI knows the word disability. is often represented with the blue wheelchair icon. But disability, people with disabilities are not this icon, right? But this tool always associates the icon with disability, which I found really, really fascinating. So while there's been so much progress, there is obviously so much more to do. So I'm moving on now to slide 12. And this brings me to the second part of the talk. What can we do about it? So to prepare this slide, I used the prompt, create an image that means to disable AI or to remove ableism from AI. And what I got back is a pretty wild image of buildings coming apart. But there's also this ray of sunlight on the ground where there are people with wheelchairs. I'm not 100% sure what the AI was thinking, but I'm going to go with it for right now. Moving on to slide 13. So I've identified 6 things that we can do to help immediately disable AI. And one of them is to reject ableist frameworks. I am a huge fan of Amy Hammerei and everything they write about disability, specifically something called the Crip Technoscience Manifesto. Now, this manifesto talks about creating accessible futures. And in it, Hammerei states that AI systems that treat disabled people only as data anomalies miss out on their creative potential. Wholeheartedly agree. So much like Ashley Shu's views, this notion rejects the notion that disability is something that can be overcome by technology. The second way to disable AI is by implementing responsible and ethical behavior. So responsible AI, not just about checking an accessibility box or complying with the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, or the WCAG guidelines. It's really about recognizing disability as a valuable form of expertise and life experience. It's not about fixing, it's not about curing disability as a goal. So those considerations should always be baked into AI from the start. Third point here has a lot to do with responsible ethical AI as well. And that means identifying and mitigating ableist assumptions in training data, in models and outputs by ensuring that data sets include disabled voices, disabled bodies, and disabled behaviors. So that's a lot to take in. Translation, we need more disability data in AI. And as we learned in the opening slides, not everyone discloses their disability. So traditional fairness metrics may miss the full picture, which is why diverse data sets are going to be really, really key from places like Disability In or other disability-led organizations. All right, moving on to slide 14. So my fourth point is the idea of participatory design. It's really essential to engage disabled users and employ people with disabilities in tech, data, and design roles. Definitely involve these users from the start and bake their lived experiences into designs and products. One point I want to make here is, though, just because someone identifies as disabled does not mean they should be responsible for the accessibility of your AI products. That's not their job, right? We all need to build things accessibly from the beginning. And the next point I want to make is actually in the middle, which is about choosing models wisely. We've been talking about LLMs a lot this week. There are tons of LLMs out there. I love Claude from Anthropic. It's one of the most ethically trained models. And when you ask it, it's quite funny. It actually tells you, I was built with clear principles that guide every interaction, backed by some of the most advanced AI safety research in the field. These principles ensure I remain honest, thoughtful, and ethical, putting trust and reliability first. So I thought that was pretty neat, which is why I really like using Claude. Gemini is also a really exceptional model as well. Now, the final point I want to make here is kind of a wacky one, I think, but engage with engineers, engage with the people building this technology. I am super lucky to work with some of the most talented folks in tech, and I can tell you that we actually commit to being ethical, participatory, and less ableist so we can help create better outputs and better products. So I hope that makes you feel a little bit better about where AI is headed, and that the people making it are also being equally as ethical. So I'm moving on to slide 15, end of the presentation. That was a lot of information. There's a ton more work to do, but I just wanted to stop on this image from Google Imagine that I generated. It's really aspirational. It's a little weird, but it's also really aspirational with self-driving cars, lanes for wheelchairs, and digital kind of accessible everything. But I kind of sit back and I wonder, what's it going to take to actually get there? I could probably talk for days about many more ways we can move forward, but I hope that you learned at least 6 things that can help, right? And those 6 things are rejecting ableist frameworks, implementing ethical, responsible AI, sourcing diverse data, engaging in participatory design, choosing models wisely, and engaging engineers. And then finally, this really leads to my summation. It's my belief that together we can continue to point out AI iniquities as they happen. And together we can challenge the who and the why behind decisions and fight for fair representation in both data and design. And we can actually do that by disabling AI. Now, I read a ton of papers for this program, just like everyone else in this Visionary Voices program. If anyone would like the list, here it is. It's a lot, it's small. Let me know, and I am happy to share any of this work with you. So that is my presentation for today. I'm super happy to take any questions that anyone has. And I'm gonna take a drink of water.
That was great, Jennifer. Thank you.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions? I know it's a lot. AI is a whole lot.
Yeah, there was a question in the chat from Harmony. I don't know if you wanted to unmute yourself, Harmony, to ask, or I can just read the question out for Jennifer. Harmony wanted to know if you don't mind sharing what AI you use to bring this presentation to life.
Yeah, so I built it in something called Figma, which is not an AI program. It's like a PowerPoint for designers, kind of. But throughout the presentation, if you go back and sort of watch it later, I've tagged which AIs I've used. I've used Google Imagen, I've used Adobe Firefly, and I've used, oh my gosh, one more. What is it? Firefly, Imagine, and ChatGPT. There's a new sort of native image generation in ChatGPT that's pretty extraordinary. And I use that to generate my images. And they're a little weird, not gonna lie. So didn't know if anyone had any feelings about those Gen AI images. They were sort of meant to be a little fascinating and weird at the same time.
Yeah, so it was interesting to see how AI envisions humans or anything that's human-like, and how right they can be, and also how very wrong they can be.
Yeah, 100%. Like these LLMs and companies have been working really hard at getting disability right, but you can see through the images that were output that the AI or the LLMs don't really understand disability quite yet, right? So again, as I said in the beginning, a lot of them think that disabled people equal white men in wheelchairs, right? Which is a part of that community, but also not representative of the entire community. So that's quite an interesting find through doing the presentation.
Absolutely. If you have time for one more question. Oh, another one popped in. Harmony also asked, how can we address these issues at the root? What about having disability studies mandatory in education, just like math and English are? This could shift the entire foundation of how we view differences, access, and human value.
Yeah, that's 100% right. I think any sort of underscore studies is really valuable in terms of addressing sort of technology and participatory design, right? And building of products. I think everyone needs to be sitting at the table in order to make those like truly inclusive technologies. It's not the easiest process, right? Because also there's a barrier to AI just because it's so mystifying, right, as a technology. So it really requires people that do work within AI to become more inclusive and to start including people in the design and build of the or development of those products.
Absolutely. Another question came in from Nadia. How do you see including people with disabilities in creating AI from the ground up, especially in terms of engaging with the engineers?
Yeah, that is an awesome question. That is one of the most important pieces, I think, of my presentation, which is finding those engineers and engaging with them. I think what we could do from our side for the people that build these products is have focus groups, right? When we're getting ready to build the product, we engage the disability community. We talk to the disability community. We get their thoughts and feelings. When we're midway through it, we talk to the disability community and get their thoughts and feelings. And then when we're ready to launch it, we talk to the disability community, right? And we get their thoughts and feelings. So I think it's not just at the beginning, at the end, it's all through the process. So I hope that answered your question,
Yes, thank you.
Nadia. You're welcome.
Absolutely. I think that's very important.
I agree. 100% agree. And I see Kate has, in my day job, have I found resistance? No, actually, I think in the AI space, whenever I bring up accessibility or inclusion, everyone nods and they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. And I think it sort of depends on where you are and what kind of company that you work for. My company is incredibly ethical and really is focused on responsible AI. But it just really depends on sort of, where you're working or who's building your product. But, luckily there are laws in place, very strong ones in the EU about ethical AI and responsible AI. So that's a really great thing.
Yeah, it seems so like common sense until you realize the work that has to go in to ensure that you're actually following through on those practices. Like, it has to be intentional, right?
It really is. Like, think about how many ethical decisions you make on a daily basis. I would say when you're working with AI, double that or triple that, because it really is every single second you have to think ethically and responsibly about what you're doing, who you're including, who you're excluding, right? Why? And it's a constant sort of ethical sort of conundrum, to be honest. But I think hopefully these 6 ways will really help everybody sort of understand a little bit more about ableism and disabling AI.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, so much. That was such an outstanding presentation, and I think that I can speak for the rest of our attendees. I really enjoyed hearing from you. Obviously, you're well-versed in this, and it's empowering to think about the steps that we can take as individuals to actually make this vision become a reality. It's so necessary. I think about accessibility in my work as a standard, as a professional communicator, but I never really considered how AI can perpetuate ableism without, a conscientious plan for how you design and apply it. So thank you again for that. Very thought-provoking.
Awesome.
So just want to remind everybody, CUNY SPS is running a raffle for those who complete a post survey of the workshop. The more sessions you attend, the better your chances of receiving a prize. Prizes include student leadership conference swag, SPS swag, and gift cards. CUNY SPS students are eligible to win both swag and the gift cards, and alumni, faculty, staff, and other CUNY students are eligible for swag. So please look out for the survey in your email. I believe also Reshma will be dropping a link in the chat. We encourage you to share your thoughts so we can continue to improve these events. Thank you again to our amazing presenter, Jennifer Andrews, on this very thought-provoking presentation. I'm going to take these ideas with me for the rest of the day. So
great. I love that. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to answer anything.
Great, awesome. Do you mind like dropping like your email or anything in the chat, Jennifer?
Yeah,
if anyone has any. So great. So thank you to everyone who attended today's session. Our next session in the Student Leadership Conference is Flight of the AI Navigator, Staring Through the Entertainment Landscape Using Artificial Intelligence. It's this evening at 7 p.m. with Tanya Perez. Hopefully we'll see you there. And that's it for now. So Jennifer dropped her email address in the chat. So if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to speak with her directly.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great rest of your day. Thank you again
Thanks
so much, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.